Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. After decades of discussion, a town in New Mexico is ditching the name of a park that honored legendary frontiersman Kit Carson. He has a checkered history as an Indian agent and Army officer that includes violent campaigns against Southwest tribes. And in Michigan, federal officials removed a large stone obelisk installed on ground that local tribal leaders had identified as sacred in 1800s treaty negotiations. We'll talk about the ongoing work to recognize historical and cultural context in public places. That conversation starts right after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Brian Bowles, sitting in for Antonia Gonzalez. A Tucson man is facing federal charges for allegedly excavating and trafficking archaeological resources from the Gila River Indian community. The U.S. Attorney's Office says 46-year-old Leo Reynoso stands accused of violating the Archaeological Resources Protection Act. Prosecutors say Reynoso allegedly removed several artifacts from the community without authorization. This included jewelry, Indian trader tokens, crucifixes, and buttons from archaeological sites on tribal land. He also stands accused of selling these items without a permit. The archaeological value of the items is estimated at $29,000, while the cost of repairing the archaeological sites is estimated at $23,000. If convicted, Reynoso faces a $20,000 fine and could get up to 2 years in prison. December 29th will mark the 130th anniversary of the Wounded Knee Massacre. In the second half of a two-part story, KJZZ's Gabriel Pietrorazio shares some Native reactions to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's assertion that the soldiers who took part in the violent and tragic incident deserve their medals of honor.
David Martinez is Akamel Otham, founder and director of ASU's Institute for Transborder Indigenous Nations.
Wherever you see America invading, sending troops, trying to intimidate, all that comes from America's original attitude towards the so-called frontier, which was regarded as wild, which was regarded as dangerous, which was regarded as full of savages.
From the Utes across modern-day Utah and Colorado to the Apaches in Arizona and New Mexico, the Army fought over a dozen conflicts, predating federal recognition of tribal governments.
There is not a tribe anywhere in North America that did not experience deep historic trauma.
Even the Bureau of Indian Affairs emerged in 1824 from within the original War Department. 2 centuries later, Martinez suggests it's fitting that Trump has restored the agency's old moniker.
Well, for me, the Department of War is the true name because from my point of view as an indigenous person, the objective in America's conquest of Indian country was to make Indian country like America. It did so at the expense of Indian land and people. And so the reservation system that we see around us today, which includes my people, Akimala of them, is a product of war.
Lakota attorney Chase Iron Eyes calls the reservations prison camps.
There are those of us who never perceived an end of war. If you look at what the reservation system is, it's not peace, prosperity, and privilege for Native people. It's a little open-air prison camp.
For Iron Eyes, who runs the Lakota People's Law Project, Wounded Knee is deeply personal.
As the great-great-grandson of people who were killed at Wounded Knee, nobody in their right mind takes pride in the slaughtering of non-combatants, women and children.
Marlis Afraid of Hawk grew up hearing horror stories from her grandfather, Richard, who was only 13 when he survived Wounded Knee. The 68-year-old Oglala Lakota elder insists Hegseth is wrong.
He's in denial. Look it up, but he's not going to.
For National Native News, I'm Gabriel Pietrorazio.
And I'm Brian Bull in the KLCC studios of Eugene, Oregon.
National Native News is produced by Kawanak Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
The Indian Arts and Crafts Board promotes Indian artists of federally recognized tribes through its online source directory. Information on this no-charge opportunity available at doi.gov/IACB, who support this program. Support for law and justice-related programming provided by Hobbs, Strauss, Dean & Walker, LLP, a national law firm dedicated to promoting and defending tribal rights for over 40 years. More information available at hobbsstrauss.com.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. City officials in Taos, New Mexico have just removed signage in the main public park that honors celebrated frontiersman Kit Carson. The decision was a result of extended discussions with leaders of nearby Taos Pueblo over the appropriateness of memorializing someone with a documented history of violent campaigns against the area's native people. Among other acts, Carson oversaw the Long Walk, in which some 3,500 Navajos died of starvation, exposure, and disease. We'll hear about that action coming up. We'll also hear about another official action responding to Michigan tribes' concerns over a monument erected by the federal government on sacred land. Both of these actions took years of discussion and public education. Listeners can join our show by calling 1-800-996-2848. Is there a problematic name or public monument where you live? Tell us about it. We're at 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joining us now in our Albuquerque, New Mexico studio is Jeremy Lujan. He is the Taos Pueblo Tribal Secretary, and he is, of course, Taos Pueblo. Jeremy, hello, and welcome to Native America Calling.
Yo. Thank you for the opportunity. It's a greeting from our traditional language, acknowledging who I am and where I come from, but also the gratitude for being on the show today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Also in our studio is Jesse Winters. He is the Taos Pueblo Second Sheriff. He is also, of course, Taos Pueblo. Jesse, welcome to you. Great to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having us this morning. Like you said, my name is Jesse Winters. It's an honor to be here.
It's great to have both of you on the show. Really appreciate you taking the time, joining us in the Albuquerque studio. Jeremy, I want to begin with you. Taos Pueblo, of course, just down the road from this park in the middle of the town of Taos. Can you describe what you and others have thought over the years as you've passed by this place honoring Kit Carson?
History is pretty, I guess it would be open for the views of other folks, but as for me, it was a question, it was a wonder, and it really never sat with me hard until most recently, as I started researching more of history, especially ours, Taos Pueblo. It became more and more an apparent of who we are as a tribal nation within Taos Valley and our extensive history. So I relied back on looking at that, and I worked for the Forest Service. I served under the Carson National Forest, and it didn't faze me as being different. But, there were some personal, I guess, I went to the boarding school growing up at SFIS. When I was there, I learned a lot of our native history, New Mexico history, not only the perspective of who we are as Pueblo people, but the shared history we have with our neighbors of Mescalero, Jicarilla, the Dene people to the west of us. So intermixing all of those teachings and those cultures, it had different views and different meanings. And so, it was hard growing up, I guess, being at the boarding school. We faced a lot of different opinions from other tribes, a lot of other resistance. But you grow tough skin as you grow up. And when I did leave Santa Fe, it allowed me to into the public school system, where I was able to compare Native history to Western history. And so that's where views and opinions started to develop and form. And again, as I moved beyond graduating high school into college, I further extended my research. And then, again, having access and information creates your different views. And looking at this and driving by Kit Carson Park, it holds a lot of memory. There's a lot of meaning to me personally. I learned how to play hockey there. My kids play hockey now, so it's one of the traditions and histories that I have. But but also having pride and wearing a Forest Service shirt that had Carson National Forest, and being naive, I guess, but not being misunderstood of who the name represented. And I got different opinions from other Native fire crews while I was out on the line, due to the shirt, to the representation. And, that's where opinions and views come into place. But, as for me, it was a place of growing up, and utilizing the public space, but not necessarily really recognizing the name.
Jesse, how about you? Seeing the name Kit Carson in downtown Taos, how's that affected you?
Well, I'd like to thank Jeremy for putting it into perspective for a lot of us. It's the same story for me. As culture is deeply ingrained as who we are, being from the Pueblo, and these relations with other tribes, such as the Dene, go back beyond Kit Carson's time. And as a kid, you don't know a lot. So my experiences at the park were just as anybody else, enjoying, like he's saying, the ice rink, the hockey rink, and just enjoying what it means to have an open community park. And as time goes on, and as the world opens up, and my eyes opened up as well, and I came into this opportunity to learn more about my people and embrace who we are as a young man. And all that knowledge comes with understanding a lot of these relations. And from my understanding, Kit Carson had a decent working relationship with a lot of other tribal nations as well. With the Dene people, they suffered a lot of atrocities. And so all this knowledge comes with understanding of our relations and where our place sits with our people at Taos Pueblo. And these are the things that you grow up with, trying to understand how your identity sits in balancing traditional roles as well as modern roles, going to school, going to work like everybody else. And it's a balance that we learn how to live with. And Kit Carson is just one of the many names and streets, like Jeremy is saying. There's the Kit Carson Forest. It really has a lot more of an effect than we realize. And so when it came to just the name of this park, coming full circle, the name of this park goes back to the 70s when, as I will always say, the forefathers before us, people before my time, were already seeing Kit Carson Park as as something identified as something to be addressed and renamed. And so now that's where we're at. We're at the point where Jeremy and I were honored to be in the roles that we're at and address I guess on some scale, the name of the park and with the meaning more behind the actual use of the park. So it became something small to something actually quite significant as my time has gone on, and I'm only 36.
Jeremy, I'd like to have you talk a little bit about the history as well, because Pueblo officials have worked for years for this change. And I'm interested in knowing what were those discussions like, even dating back to the 1970s, as Jesse mentions. And the town had actually decided to rename the park about 10 years ago. Why didn't it happen then?
Going back into the history, as if, of course, you're all aware that Taos Pueblo fought for our sacred lands of Blue Lake, the Blue Lake Wilderness, which was removed from Taos Pueblo ownership by the United States government in 1906, and was named a part of the Carson National Forest. Our ancestral and Aboriginal ties to the land and our testimony by our tribal elders and our tribal council in that 64-year struggle should be looked at as the template of who we are as a people and a community, and the resilience that we had to be able to uphold that battle and persevere to this day, and still to this day call that unceded land. You know, it was never removed. We were never removed from our ancestral lands. We were never brought out. We were, that's our home. That Taos Valley is our home, and that history in itself, predates Western history, and with that structure that our councilmen and our forefathers provided for us in that 64-year struggle. Those are the words of our elders and our elder community that spoke up with interpretation, because a lot of our elders only spoke Tiwa. Our history is oral, our tradition is oral, and so those stories that we have today still carry in each of us in everyday life, and that movement created, I think, wanting Kit Carson Park to be changed later on in the 70s. And again, it got no traction. It faded out, and then again it was reintroduced in 2014. And the process, the way the town aligned itself with the Pueblo, didn't really gain much traction. There was not much support to it, other than Red Willow being recommended the first time. And again,
Okay.
That was more public opinion.
Jeremy, I'm going to have to interject here because we need to take a break. But when we come back, we're going to talk more about the significance of the new name of the park, Red Willow Park. And appreciate both of you gentlemen here in the studio today. Phone lines are open for listeners who'd like to join us, 1-800-99-NATIVE. The window for buying gifts for that special person in your life is closing, at least for this holiday season, but there's still time to think about what Native business owners and creators have to offer. We'll talk with Native entrepreneurs about their work and the current retail-focused season on the next Native America Calling.
The Association on American Indian Affairs invites all to Tribal Museums Day, December 6th through December 12th. Tribal museums may offer no-cost or reduced admission, art markets, and live cultural demonstrations. Tribal Museums Day honors diverse Native nations as the experts of their own cultures. You can find a map of tribal museums and more at indian-affairs.org/Tribal Museums Day. The association supports this show.
We're glad you're along with us today on Native America Calling. We are talking about work by tribes to remove public monuments that have not stood the test of time when it comes to adequately recognizing Native culture and history. One of those is Kit Carson Park in Taos, New Mexico, that was just renamed Red Willow Park. Are there other place names you think should be changed? Let us know. Give us a call. 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. We have two Taos Pueblo tribal members with us today, Jeremy Lujan and Jesse Winters. And Jeremy, you mentioned right before break, Red Willow. Tell us more about the significance of that name and how you see it changing the contemporary narrative of Taos.
It's who we are. It's who we identify as, our community, our people. And that's what we're known as by other tribal nations to to the south of us, to the east of us, to the north of us, to the west of us. And history puts us as a trading post between going to the flats of the east and going to the hots of the west, anywhere in between north and south. Taos was looked at as a main trading hub, and as, of course, when colonial expansion came, the Spaniards visited, the Mexican government took over, and then, of course, now the United States. And within that time, we've been tested, but we never left. We were never removed. And with that recognition, that's who we are as a people. We're a living community. We're a striving community. And it's who we are. That's us, the Red Willow people. You know, we don't want any further recognition of anything else other than just acknowledging that we're still caretakers of the land, stewards of the land, and that we continue to provide culture and tradition for our community, knowing that, you know, those lands are unceded Pueblo land, Taos Pueblo, and, you know, and we're grateful to continue to have the lands that we do, but also the understanding that, you know, it took a lot for our grandfathers, for our forefathers, beyond the test of time, against other tribal nations, against imposing governments that came in, the Spanish law, the Mexican law, the U.S. laws. And even today, fighting the civil and the municipalities of law, you know, those are things that are failing to address who we are as a community and as a people. And
it's just amazing, the history, how far it goes back. And, you know, our listeners are always really, really intrigued by these types of stories and this type of history that's shared on our show daily. Jesse, I want to bring you back into the conversation because you were also one of the members of the renaming committee. And tell us a little bit more about those meetings and some of the other committee members and what the dialogue was like and what got you involved with that.
It started being appointed by tribal government. I had the opportunity to sit in on the initial meetings with the town of Taos and Councillor Genevieve Oswald. They were looking for someone to represent Taos Pueblo and sit on this chair in the renaming process. And so I was appointed through Taos Pueblo tribal government, the governor and the war chief's office. And so it was a huge honor. I was really happy to be thought of in the light that I could be the person to fill this role. And so I took it, like I said, as a huge honor, and I did my due diligence to voice all of the happenings from the committee into the tribal government offices, whether it be through correspondence with the town of Taos. And as the process went on, I got to learn more about the history of the park, which ended up just being more history about my people. And going back to the meaning of Red Willow, I had the opportunity to look at some of the testimonies from some of the people in 2014 trying to opt for the name of the change of the park. And I remember one of our community members, Robert Maribal, said something to the effect of Red Willow is the Taos Valley. And like Jeremy says, and as it is in Taos, Red Willow grows all over the Taos Valley. In, you know, Taos, the Kit Carson Park, now Red Willow Park, is just a fraction of our home, what we would call our homelands, and how far we used to roam extended beyond the Taos Plateau. So seeing anywhere in the Taos Valley, you'll come across Red Willow where there's water, and that's just an extension of our identity and how far our roots go and how far our people are ingrained into the landscape itself. So as the process went on, the Kit Carson Park name change became a lot more than just the name of the park. I consulted with some of our tribal elders and asked their experiences with the park, their stories from the park and what it used to be used for. there was lots of consultation that I corresponded back to the town of Taos and had the opportunity to have some of our tribal council even speak on one of the platforms there. So it was a long process, and as it went on, challenges with trying to get on the town of Taos's timeline was a little bit challenging, trying to correspond that with tribal council's timeline. So it was a lot of work, and me and Jeremy, I'm grateful for his help on this way. He's been my big brother, my guidance, as we always do in our way. You consult with your elders, and he was my go-to to get me conversations with the tribal council and to express the message back to the town of Taos. And so with this name change, if anyone looks into it, there's a lot more that goes with the town of Taos's resolution. And I recommend anybody out there look into that. And so the town of Taos actually came out grateful for more of involvement with the tribe, which I also thank them for, because it was a rare opportunity for them to offer the tribe a chair at this at a juncture like that, at an event like this. It was such a impactful event in our community, in the Taos community. And on a personal level, as I met the community, it's only been positive feedback. I've really enjoyed meeting the committee members. There's been professors, judges, lots of people that I've had the pleasure of meeting along this process.
Okay. You haven't experienced any opposition to taking Carson's name off the park?
Not personally. And, I'm not on social media, so I don't care to see what is out there. Of course, I believe there's always opposition, but not personally. When I see my community on a face-to-face basis, whether it's my own community or the Taos community at large, people I don't know come up to me and thank me for my service. And that's all I feel like I really did. I didn't have not much of an opinion. I tried to have, my opinion was based upon having the process go to the proper avenues before it moved forward. And so that was via consultation with my elders.
Jeremy, how about you? Have you come across any opposition to taking Kit Carson's name off that park? And if so, do you have an answer to any residents who still think that Kit Carson is worthy of memorializing?
To the reflection of this process, my involvement was called upon by Jesse after the situation became a little convoluted with the way the process was moving along. Again, civil responsibility within their timelines of achieving a goal and objective by the end of the year. And of course, as tribal appointment goes, it's only a 1-year term. And with the re-election happening within the town of Taos, it created a juncture within the timeline, which was we were getting pressed by the renaming committee to move forward. But also by then, public opinion was already astir within the town of Taos. Of course, media, newspaper, and again, the dialogue making a shift, and again, addressing more needs than the name Kit Carson. It involved a few tribal nations. It involved a few activists and folks that were taking the lead on the renaming process, which Jesse didn't feel comfortable with, where he sought guidance from me, and as of course we moved through chain of command within tribal government, we went through the process to address the concerns and how to properly move forward. And so we were entertained a discussion with tribal council where we sought their opinion and their meaning. And of course, these are gentlemen who serve in the traditional capacity, but have also been appointed to council from service as governors and lieutenants, war chiefs and lieutenants. So their foundation and then their stirrups are what provided us with the dialogue to move forward and how to properly address the renaming committee. But also shifting the dialogue from outside opinion, outside dialogue, which was getting carried with. And I think that's where a lot of misidentity took place. And once we were given council support, we drafted correspondence to the renaming committee with some stipulations that are included to honoring, to having a land acknowledgement, but also creating a working relationship with the town of Taos. And this was also, I think, the key breaking point because there has been involvement with tribal government and the town of Taos. It doesn't, this is one of the arrows in the quiver that we can look as an accomplishment because we do rely on infrastructure services and, there are needs that we do address within the town of Taos, and we look forward to creating and keeping that working relationship.
Okay.
And so, having the opportunity and the voice and of our people is what carried us to move forward collectively. I know that the failed attempt in 2014 didn't have the support needed from the Pueblo community. So, with the understanding now and having that voice come directly from tribal council, and being able to interpret their thoughts and their feelings, and how to guide us, and then it gave direction to the renaming committee, and it also allowed the community to see who we are. But today, we still see social media is out there. The editorial, the Taos News, there's media. Once media gets a hold of it, of course there's people that are going to be upset, but it's not renaming history. It's not changing history, and it's not moving away from history. And we again, the Carson National Forest still exists. The Kit Carson Internet, Kit Carson Electric Company.
Right.
There's a lot of street names that still hold.
Okay, Jeremy, I'm sorry. I want to bring in another voice into our conversation now because I think it would help our listeners just to get a little bit more of the history and just talk a little bit more about Kit Carson and who he was as a historical figure and what his impact was in that region. So joining us now from Mesilla, New Mexico is Dr. Gregorio Gonzalez. He is the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Pueblo of Cochiti, and he is Comanche and Hanisero. Gregorio, hello, and welcome to our show. Great to have you.
Hey, Maruaweka, Dinanyatsa Gregorio Gonzalez, native New Mexico, Naitana, Mesilla Canibaitana, Nanana Manatsa Gonzalez na, Tuasa Pacheco na, Tuasa Harris na, Tuasa Tabatait na. And good morning to everyone. I'm glad to be here and to be able to join in this incredible conversation and being able to hear the voices of Taos Pueblo leaders really getting to show us what that process is. And I'm grateful to be with you all today.
Sure. Yeah, we're having a great conversation. We have a few minutes before we have to take our next break, so let's get into it and give us some more historical background here, Gregorio. How important was Kit Carson's relationship with not just the town of Taos, but surrounding communities?
Yeah, Kit Carson is, we can kind of think of him as really, even today, he was really kind of the symbol of like American frontierism, of that Western expansion, that notion of manifest destiny, and really kind of a key marker of that settler state mythology. Like he, makes his way to New Mexico from, I think from Missouri, and but he has very much that sort of that legacy really of being a sort of a frontiersman and being a mountain man, and and having that sort of pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of a legacy really for the American consciousness in that way. And so he makes his way actually as an Indian agent in New Mexico in the 1850s, for specifically an Indian agent for the Utes, the Jicarillas, and as well as my understanding was even doing work there at Taos Pueblo, between like the mid 1850s all the way into the early 1860s. But his sort of his presence in New Mexico definitely extended in that way, where he ended up leading a volunteer cavalry regiment in New Mexico during the Civil War, and then after the Civil War, he ends up kind of being brought in, still in that capacity as an Indian fighter, but specifically leading military units against Comanches, against Mescalero Apaches, against Kiowas, and against our Navajo relatives. So in a really direct way, he kind of became a symbol of that sort of notion of manifest destiny, and that it was predetermined by that sort of Christian sort of ideology that that Native peoples would submit to U.S. power in that way. So he's a very much that kind of that iconic figure in terms of wanting to talk about all that is America, right? And in New Mexico, that was really kind of one of the key places where he left that legacy, to the point where, like I think our Pueblo relatives were describing, that his name is on billboards, is on street names. He's even on the internet providers, electricity providers, gas. So it's so he's such an important part of how the U.S. tried to naturalize itself in New Mexico and in the broader in the region, which has been such a contested space. So it really is a very intentional effort that his name has been used in that particular way to sort of articulate those ideas.
All right. Gregorio, we're going to take a short break. We're going to come back, and I'd like you to talk when we come back about how Kit Carson's legacy holds up now here in the contemporary era. We'll be right back, listeners. Stay with us.
Support from Clarkson Potter, publisher of Turtle Island, Foods and Traditions of the Indigenous Peoples of North America by Native American chef Sean Sherman. With ancestral and modern recipes, this cookbook showcases diverse foodways of the continent's regions.
Ready to expand your reach and inspire change? Kaufman & Associates crafts culturally grounded communication strategies for Native audiences. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
Thank you for listening to Native America Calling. We are hearing about recent actions by government officials to recognize Native perspectives in public memorials and place names. In many cases, tribes had no say in the decisions to honor historical figures. That's all the more reason to join today's conversation with your comments and your questions. Call us at 1-800-996-2848. We have Dr. Gregorio Gonzalez on the line right now. He is the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Pueblo of Cochiti. And Gregorio, as you and our other guests have noted earlier, Kit Carson still, and for the longest time, viewed as a historic figure in many places, a heroic figure, in fact. Although he did lead violent campaigns against Navajos and Apaches, how does this legacy hold up now, today, in a contemporary historical context?
Yeah, I think it's important to really reflect on what our Pueblo relatives have shared in terms of thinking about kind of historical contexts and the ways that those shift with time, and really with the ways that our own kind of consciousness raising happens, whether it's through education in the Western way or whether it's through our traditional teachings. And I think when it comes to folks having an awareness of the continued impact of those kinds of actions, when it comes to naturalizing these kinds of figures who were very key in undermining the expression of tribal peoplehood, of our understandings of an independent indigenous existence, that that these are very intentional acts. These are very purposeful acts by the settler state in a way to assert that kind of claim, and as well as to make it, as a part, as natural as the landscape itself, to the point where now, as our guests have shared with us, where we have, a whole national forest, named after this man. We also have, the Carson City, Nevada, where
right.
I actually had the opportunity to go and visit through the recent conference of the National Association of Tribal Historic Preservation Officers, and get to listen to what our Paiute relatives and our Shoshone relatives, our Washoe relatives, what their stories are of those places, and why Kit Carson is such an inconsistent narrative and figure when it comes to those stories of our relatives and their relationships to those places. So I see these things as very intentional in the way that that the government tries to, again, assert that kind of authority, that power. But then now we're kind of at this point where I think tribal nations are starting to really see this opportunity as a way to not just kind of speak to a void, but rather to actually to engage thoughtfully and meaningfully in what those histories were and what those experiences have been, but then also moving the conversation beyond one of those things where we're having to retell those kinds of historical traumas, but instead invest in our peoplehood, instead invest in who we are as indigenous peoples and as tribal nations. So I think that's a fundamentally different question than what I think the settler state has kind of demanded when it comes to kind of place naming, and so I mean, to the point where even in Santa Fe, New Mexico, there's still a monument that is dedicated to Kit Carson that is in front of the federal court building there in Santa Fe, so the state capital of New Mexico. And I was fortunate to be in the room and had the opportunity to, during my previous time as the tribal liaison for the New Mexico Department of Cultural Affairs, and I got to, listen in on, I think, a very frank discussion that was happening as to, what is the appropriateness of this kind of memorialization. And, unfortunately, that was at the tail end of the previous federal administration. And as I think we all can understand now today, the current federal administration has a very different take on history and especially on kind of concepts and practices and of indigenous peoplehood. But even during that time, we have to see these kinds of actions being done by Pueblo nations and by tribal nations, not as isolated incidents, but as actually quite as continued conversations that have been happening for years at this point. So it's disappointing in the way that that we were at the cusp of being able to have a really genuine and think critically about this man and his legacy in New Mexico, and yet at the very moment where that could have happened, again, different priorities happened through the settler state, and now we are where we are today. But that's not to undermine or to silence, I think, the incredible contributions that Pueblo leaders and that tribal officials from across Indian country have made in speaking out about these things. But it does kind of demonstrate a certain way that, given a certain government's priorities and a certain way that they want to read history and their relationships to tribal nations, that we we can see that sort of that shift, the pendulum swing in such vastly different ways. But even more of a reason and more of a celebration that the Pueblo of Taos was able to accomplish this and do so in service of their people.
Thank you, Gregorio. I really appreciate you joining the conversation, sharing your insights. Let's talk now about another official action responding to tribes in Michigan. Concerns over a monument that was erected by the federal government on sacred land. And to do that, we have another guest, Paula Carrick, who joins us now from the Bay Mills Indian community in Michigan. She is the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Bay Mills Indian community. She's also a tribal member. Paula, great to have you on the show today. Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, tell us more here. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers recently removed a stone obelisk from an area that's important to your tribe. Tell us about this land that is located on St. Mary's River there in northern Michigan.
Okay. Well, back in 1820, it was June of 1820 that Lewis Cass arrived here at Bawating. It's a place of the rapids in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. And it's at the time it was Chief Shingawasan, who was the Crane Clan chief there, and he had told Lewis Cass that he cannot have that land. It was the land of our ancient burial ground, and that was in 1820. So, well, they took the land. It came to be that in 1998, my sister and I started the Bay Mills History Department here to learn the history of our tribe, because a lot of our history was lost. And in December of 98, we first learned of Section 106 by a letter that came through our office that they were going to demolish the burial ground and turn it into a big bandstand. Well, my sister, she's older than me, and she knew that it was a burial ground. So we went to fight, and we started fighting to not have it, demolished. Part of it was demolished in 1855 when they did built the locks down there, and so half of it was gone. So we did go to fight, and it took us many years to fight for it. As a matter of fact, it took a total of 27 years to have the obelisk removed. It was smack dab in the middle of our ancient burial ground. But the Corps of Engineers told us that we had to prove it was a burial ground, even though it was on all their old maps, burial ground. They made us prove it was a burial ground. And so we did. Then they made us prove that we had ancestors buried there. So we did. And it came to pass that Shingawasan, the tribal chief at the time, his brother was Sasaba, who was our head war chief. And as I don't know if you know the history of Sault Ste. Marie up here, but Sasaba did not agree with how Lewis Cass and his soldiers were treating the natives when they were in council. He thought they were very disrespectful. Sasaba did not like the Americans at the time because his brother was killed. They fought along Tecumseh in the War of 1812, so they lost a brother. So Sasaba took the British flag and he went and posted it up on the hill, the highest point. Well, Lewis Cass, he was furious, and they were preparing for war. So it ended up that day that we had to give up 16 square miles of our land. But in the treaties, we kept that, the right to hunt and fish and to encamp. So somewhere over the line, everything was taken from us. Mm-hmm. Then we had, the boarding era that all the our grandparents, like my grandmother, was kidnapped at the age of 5 and put in the Mount Pleasant boarding school, where she spent the rest of her life till she was 22 years old. She could graduate and leave. So we never had a lot of say back in them days because of the boarding schools were taking the Native American out of us.
So now here we are, it took 27 years. I can't get over it, almost 30 years to have this obelisk removed. Do you know what the Army Corps of Engineers is going to do with this actual obelisk? I mean, I've looked at pictures online. It's huge.
Yeah, it was huge. We had some testing done on it 2 years ago that it was cracked. It had all these cracks and everything up near the top. They didn't even think it was going to make it when they were taking it down. I do think that they probably cut it up.
Okay,
but
so
that's their choice. That's not mine. I was just glad to see it gone off our ancient burial ground.
And now that it's gone, what more can be done to heal this wound? And are there any plans to adequately recognize the significance and the importance of this location?
Yes, they can let us have jurisdiction over the inside, give the land back to us give our burial, because like right now they have control over it. It's still in their name. I think they should give it back to us, and that's our next battle, is to get it back into our jurisdiction. We have say over it. You know, and as we continue to repatriate all the remains that were taken from there by the Army Corps doctor in 1872, Dr. Charles King, who took a bunch of our ancestors and put them in the Smithsonian. So as they come back and as we get them off, we want to put them back in there. We are right now in the battle, them taking some of them back in the 60s, this is the 1960s, in the 70s and the 80s, that now the ancestors are at MSU. We're in the battle right now to go get them and put them back in there. So we want to have jurisdiction to say, yeah, they're going back in there. We don't want to have to ask the Corps of Engineers, can we put our ancestors back that you took from there? We want to say it.
Mm-hmm. Paula, when did you first get involved with this effort, and what's really kept you going? It sounds like you've been involved in this for a long time. I'm just curious, how did you stick with it for all these years?
December of 1998.
Mm-hmm. 27 years.
27
how have you hung
years.
In? Yeah.
Yep. So I just kept pestering and write letters. So it finally came to pass.
And when it finally came down, what was the reaction among your people?
Oh, we were very excited. All the natives and all the Michigan were very excited, Wisconsin and Minnesota. Yeah, even the ones on the Canadian side. You know, we were all family. There was no borders back in the day. We still have relatives, you know, across the border and in the other tribes in Michigan. So we were all family. We're all one.
Paula Carrick, Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Bay Mills Indian Community. This is northern Michigan we're talking about here. Paula, we've got about a minute here before we need to wrap up, but these locks, just give us a brief understanding, explanation of what there are, a piece of infrastructure there for boats and shipping vessels. Tell us a little bit more about why that location and how that all plays into this as well.
Well, where it's located, we had called it Mawating, which means the place of the rapids. It was rapids back in the day before 1850, and it was very large, very loud. But through that area, it was, you know, that's the highway. That was the highway that everyone took to get anywhere, was through there. And so they wanted to establish a fort there, which they did, Fort Brady. And then they went to, in 1850, was to start the Sioux Locks, which they did, but they wanted to have that shipping because it was a great area for the fur trade too. You know, and everybody came through there, even before the Europeans came here. That was the highway for all the tribes to go through there. Of course, a lot of them rode the rapids, yeah, but they portaged them around them too.
All right, all right.
Only the natives could do the rapids.
Okay. We're out of time. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up our conversation today, but big thanks to our four guests who joined us: Paula Carrick, Dr. Gregorio Gonzalez, Jesse Winters, and Jeremy Lujan. Please join us again next week when we'll start off talking about the holiday retail shopping season with new and established Native entrepreneurs. Our executive producer is Art Hughes. Our producers are Andy Murphy, Sol Traverso, and Joe Thompson. Marino Spencer is the engineer. Sho McPolin is the digital producer. Nola Daves Moses is the distribution director. Bob Peterson is the network manager for Native Voice One. Clifton Chadwick is our national underwriting sales director. Antonia Gonzalez is the anchor for National Native News. Charles Sather is our chief operations officer. The president and CEO of Koahnic Broadcast Corporation is Jacqueline Salee. Have a safe weekend. I'm Sean Spruce.
Support provided by Amarant, Amerind is 100% tribally owned and partners with tribes and their businesses to provide affordable commercial insurance coverage, protect tribal sovereignty, and strengthen Native American communities by helping to keep dollars in Indian country. Information about property, liability, commercial auto, and workers' comp available at amerind.com. That's AMERIND.com. The Indian Arts and Crafts Act protects authentic American Indian and Alaska Native artists and craftspeople and their art and craft work. Under the Act, it is illegal to market art or craft work misrepresented as American Indian, Indian, Native American, or Alaska Native made, or as the product of a particular Indian tribe. Reporting potential Act violations can be done at doi.gov/IACB or at 1-888-ART-FAKE. Support provided by Indian Arts and Crafts Board.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.